Thank you so much. This is a hard place to be in the middle of you and the drinks. So I'm going to try to do the best job on make it relevant. Can you hear me well? Yeah? Okay. So as the title of my presentation explains, I'm going to talk to you about quality. And of course, you might be worried that this is going to be a boring presentation related to quality in the middle of you and the drinks. But bear with me. I trust that you will walk away with a few helpful ideas that will unpeel the journey of digitization and overall strategy that I believe all companies are driving right now, which is a data-driven quality and data-driven sustainability. So, okay, let's get started with that. So, in terms of what you have been seeing today from solutions, technologies that are being implemented in the different fronts of the business, I'm sure there's a lot of optimism that you get from these presentations, a lot of ideas, but we also need to be aware that there's also a lot of hype in what is being discussed. And for example, the big word in the rooms is digitization. But if we look at digitization, we can look at it from different perspectives, and digitization is a mean to an end. So what I'm going to try to do today in this presentation, and also with our guest speaker, is to give you a view of what is underneath the layers of that big word that is digitization. And how do we start evaluating digitization, not only from the point of moving pen and paper to digital through mobile or web, but how do we move this into a deeper conversation of how are we driving our data strategy long-term for our companies? And how do we differentiate the different solutions that we have? Because in fact, there are a wide variety of solutions that are being presented right now, and there's not a good or bad solution, but I think it's all about differentiating the solution that fits on your needs. So first, let me start with a very quick summary of what has happened on the last 30 years for global sourcing and quality, okay? This is a simplified version of what happened on the last 30 years. But 1989, mass privatization of the manufacturing sector in China, factories open up for business globally, all these different buyers are coming in, brands and retailers diversifying their supplier metrics, and there's a massive growth of number of vendors and factories. As that grows, also different approaches are being implemented for quality. Inspections become really big. The policeman approach is the one that was governing the times of going and sending multiple inspections across the production line, and then final randoms, and then before shipment. But as this grows, also the complexity grows, and the big questions about sustainability start appearing. So if are we going to keep doing this? Is this taking us to the right places? And how do we do this in a better way? And of course, technology start kicking in. And then we have ERP systems, and then we have the growth of Alibaba that start really changing the dynamics based on which the global sourcing operates. And in that process, also there's a shift of a strategy that is more from QC to QA, early on the production lines, and start building this relational stage where vendors and factories start being seen as partners in the journey of delivering products of good quality, but also that are produced responsibly. And I believe right now we're entering into this new era that is really the one that is based on these partnerships that are built not only based on this collaboration, but it moves one step ahead, which is systems integrations and data exchange. So in order for this to really kick in and take the speed that it should be taken, it's important that the companies that are driving this build strategies that allow that long-term view. So the big question is, how are we addressing that? All right, and then digitization. So the first thing, this is the low-hanging fruit, right? I think we all from the industry feel a little bit uncomfortable when we see this image. When we are on the times of autonomous cars, we're on the times of having potentially a community of humans already living in Mars in the next 5 years. But inspections in many ways are driven still by the majority of cases like this. But when we say, okay, we're gonna digitize this, what are we gonna digitize? Are we gonna digitize with the goal of replacing those papers you see on the side and the camera? And that's the end goal of digitization? Are we gonna digitize because we want to make the inspection process easier for that inspector? Or are we digitizing because there's a bigger end to that? So when we think about digitization, I think it's important to recognize that digitization is the first step of a journey that needs to have an objective. And each company needs to define exactly what is the objective that they're driving. Not just for the sake of digitization. So the bigger picture, as you start identifying first the low-hanging fruit of the inspection itself and the execution, and take one step back, you start looking that this is only one part of the bigger problem that generates the repetition or the lack of exchange of data that exists. So yes, we digitize the inspection, but then, or we have factories that have implemented ERP systems, but potentially what we're doing is we're moving from paper processes to digital processes, but we didn't fix the problem. And still, the data that is coming from the manufacturers are not really connecting or collaborating with their vendors or their vendors with the brands and retailers or the inspection companies. So how do we move forward from there? Because we don't want to invest all the resources that are going to be invested to transition into a digital journey to just stay right there. But only right now we replace the paper for databases that are isolated. The additional problem that this isolation of data and the data silos that appear in this approach of the quick win of digitization is that there's still limited trust. So even if you implement digital solutions to run your quality control or do an audit, if it's coming from outside and is not fully embraced as a quality management system or a sustainability management system by the different stakeholders, then what ended up happening is there's a multiple repetitions of tasks that happen. So I'm illustrating this with a slide that basically shows what could happen if, and this happens in multiple occasions. You have a factory that has implemented a system, and then you have the vendor coming in that doesn't trust whether this was actually executed or properly, and then also execute the same kind of activities, and on top of that, the retailer, and on top of that, the inspection companies. So we have been working on fixing this problem for quite some time. First, from my background, I worked for over a decade in sourcing. I started a sourcing company that I grew and expanded through Southeast Asia, and I experienced firsthand the complexities of first the pen and paper, so the quick win. But then once you start implementing these mobile solutions to collect data, and you start collaborating closer with your vendors and factories, and you start building these long-term relations, then how do we approach this differently? How do we exchange data and make it relevant? And we create these real connections that allow us to deliver better products, that allow us to really have real-time information as it happens and be faster and more efficient. So we embarked in this journey about 3.5 years ago. With Inspectorio, and we decided to address this from two fronts. One is the horizontal way of fixing this problem of data flows between different organizations, and then is about the vertical approach of how deep you want to go. And then what is your data strategy to really not only collect the data, but then go into the different phases of how do you generate value through this data in the long term? And how do we create how the future of how quality and sustainability should be performed? So first, in terms of architecture, what is very important is the dynamic of collaborations between companies that operate Inspectorio. So Inspectorio is a network platform where companies can connect with their different partners. So for example, a brand and retailer creates a private network for their different vendors and factories operating with them. And then there's this sharing data and collaboration. But what is more important is for that vendor and factory that is implementing Inspectorio for retailer 1, if they start working with retailer 2, because either retailer 2 decided to implement Inspectorio or because they embrace it as a quality management system, they embrace Inspectorio as a quality management system, they don't need to run a separate instance, and they work and have a centralized view of all the data of their entire operation within this one view of data and centralized operation that helps them drive improvements across all their operation and across all the production in the different facilities. So today you're going to hear more about that because this is not an idea. It's something that is happening at a very fast pace. Inspectorio within the last 3 years have been implemented by over 5,000 companies, including the largest retailers and brands in the world. And with that, the ecosystem keeps growing quickly because the next retailer or brand that decides to implement Inspectorio has already a high percentage of their vendors and factories already implementing Inspectorio. So it's as simple as creating a connection with them and start sharing data and collaborating. So first is connections, but then what do you do with the data? And you have all these different sources of data. So yes, we fixed the first problem. First problem is all these different sources of data, how do we make them collaborate and connect them? Once you connect them, then what do you do with that? So that's another question that when you start thinking about digitization is, are we collecting data to do something with that? And do we expect us to build data scientist teams within our companies to help us drive this? Or do we want a solution that allows us to already get those insights, those recommendations, those predictions within the platform? So this is the other big challenge that really excites us about what we're doing with Inspectorio, which is the use of data science, particularly machine learning for predictability and recommendations for many different use cases that adds value not to one user, but to the whole ecosystem that is operating this. So turning data into actionable insights. And from there, also another big pursuit that I believe all of us have within the different companies we operate is automation. But there's, again, different ways to drive automation. And automation sounds similar, but there's many different approaches to do that. So what we are doing in essence is we already live in times that retailers have their own internal systems, and these retailers are working with vendors and factories that they also have their own internal systems, ERP systems, PLM systems. What Inspectorio is a network that collects as a layer of collaboration on top of those organizations and allow them to exchange data. And that data is, for example, the particular quality program for a retailer or brand that is shared within that private network. It could be the defect classifications that they have, the inspection protocols, the type of audits that needs to be executed, and then to automate that so that a new order is issued, then that is transferred and received by the organization, let's say a vendor, and then from that, the vendor executes the different activities that the system guides, then gets executed, then the data gets shared back, and not only for one retailer or brand, but for everyone that is working within Inspectorio and it's part of this network. So with that, now I think it's important to give you, so this is very abstract. So what I want to try to do is to move this abstract explanation of what it is to actually users explaining you and what's the value of Inspectorio. And the value of Inspectorio, because of the way that we have developed it, has different personas. So there is the retailer view first in the organization level. There's the retailers and brands view. There's the vendors view. There's the factories view. And within those organizations, you have the auditor view. You have the quality manager view. You have the top management view. So we are going to try to give you a sense of what Inspectorio creates to the different personas within those different organizations. And let's start with a retailer.
In the past, we was doing inspection. We would manually record our data into a computer application.
Even from our vendor, they need to send the booking manually, so sometimes it's not accurate.
72% of the industry still relies on pen and paper today. That means very little visibility, barely any transparency, no efficiencies, and sometimes it takes even days to gather any basic type of reporting.
With Inspectorio, we create a digital ecosystem where companies can share data real time.
It's very, very convenient. It is one-stop shop from booking to inspection to data analytics.
Now it's very easy for us. Yeah, my team is already expert to use the platform.
All the data that is being generated makes everybody smarter. It allows our machine learning algorithms to become more and more accurate in predictive technologies.
With Inspectorio, you can customize workflows. That means that you can execute inspections with our mobile platform based on predefined standards.
The vendor and factory also see the same as what we see. It established a common language for target and also for our vendor and factory to drive for continuous improvement.
We have the largest network of factories, vendors, brands and retailers, inspection agencies, all operating in one same space.
Vendors and factories are finally going to have access to actionable data that will make it possible for them to accurately identify trends in the defect and to improve their quality over time.
For me as a leader, I also have more visibility on our team performance, vendor performance at any time, anywhere. So this is the thing that we love, accurate information.
It's a combination between app platform, web platform, data science, machine learning, and more efficient human intervention.
That's the real power of what we're building. We're helping companies to identify where are the areas of improvements. And with all that data, we will be able to tell final consumers the story behind the products they buy. We're bringing light into supply chains.
Great. So that is a retailer view of implementing Inspectorio. Quite a large retailer, one of the largest in the world. So the potential challenges that a retailer like that might face on implementing technology within their large ecosystem. All of their vendors, all of their factories to execute the different activities for their orders, and then for those vendors to potentially see the value of this first interaction with Inspectorio, and then to say, hey, this makes sense as a quality management system for my whole operation. And that is what is happening with Inspectorio at a very accelerated pace. And that's the network effect of Inspectorio. So we grow really quickly because the vendors and factories are suggesting their brands and retailers to implement Inspectorio because they are already operating for the majority of their business. So I gave you a view of the retailer/brand view of implementing Inspectorio. I wanted to invite Danny Lowe, please, to the stage. Danny is the chairman and CEO of Winga Apparel. Winga works with some of the leading brands and retailers in the world, has a diversified manufacturing presence across Asia, and has gone through a lot of learnings of the digitization process that we speak today. And I wanted to appreciate Danny for decided to join us today and share his journey on digitization. So with that, please join me with applause to welcome Dan.
Okay.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Carlos. I just wanted to start by saying that Inspectorio didn't pay me to do any of this. I just did it really because I truly believe in what Inspectorio is offering. So just a quick introduction of Winga. I won't spend too much time here. Winga, we're an intimate apparel manufacturer that manufactures panties, bras, and bralettes. If you go to our website, winga.com.hk, you can find more details there. And then just a quick overview of what we do. We have 2 offices in New York and Hong Kong. We have 5 factories across China, Vietnam, and Bangladesh. And we have over 6,000 workers worldwide. Also, because this will play an important role in the later part of digitalization, we actually do a lot of day-to-day communication and management in our Hong Kong office. We do a lot of sourcing, sampling, communication with our clients. As well, we offer a lot of design services as an added value and state-of-art production. And one of our flagship factories now is in Vietnam. So the main reason why I'm here today is to talk about my journey towards digitalization. So Carlos mentioned part of it, and then I also want to give my insight as well. So what is digitizing, what quality is? Is it simply converting a piece of paper into an Excel document? Is it converting a sketch or an image into a JPEG? Or is it converting a fax into an email? Well, everyone has their own term or thought about that, but for quality, one of the key issues that we face is that, well, number one, we deal with many multiple clients, and each client has a different interface or platform or application. As a result, multiple applications actually have a lot of different databases. Our A retailer has one database. Our B retailer has a different database, all on separate networks, all that have to be data mined separately. You see where this is going. Over time, we actually had to create teams to data mine and kind of process the enormous amount of data that was put through these systems. And in the end, what happened was my version of digitization was basically data silos. Something that was left untouched. When you need it, you have to data mine it. If you don't touch it, it just stays buried forever. And I always felt that when I go to buyer meetings and I talk to our buyers about vendor performance, factory performance, it would take my teams a week, 2 weeks, just to data mine 1 year's worth of data on performance. And that doesn't make any sense. Why am I always chasing data? Data should be meaningful to make us, empower us to do more things. And that's why it's very complex and costly. So what ended up happening was, we started working with Inspectorio, and then we became from a quality data collection to a data-driven quality. Just read that again, because I got a little confused at first. So quality data collection versus data-driven quality. Carlos mentioned about one platform and it encompassing multiple clients. Trust me, when I first looked at Inspectorio and its concept and heard about what they're trying to do, I asked the question, how? How, Carlos? How, Inspectorio? Do you plan to do this? Because during the whole presentation, I'm not sure if anyone was really reading between the lines, who's going to enter all the data into Inspectorio? What I didn't know was that actually over time, when I was learning more about Inspectorio, was that all the data was already integrated into the system. What does that mean? From PO, SKU level, quantity, description, ship date, even the tech pack on the PLM. Once it was approved, Inspectorio already integrated all that data into their platform. And as a result, now on our QA team, all they have to do is just confirm the inspection date, press the confirm, and it's out. So that was great. Next was, because all the data was consolidated and it was integrated into the Inspectorial system, there was one single source of truth. No longer are we faced with PO revisions, ship date discrepancies, or quantity discrepancies. Everything was integrated, so we have one single source of truth. If Inspectorio says the ship date is next week, then it's next week. If it's 10,000 pieces, it's 10,000 pieces, because that's directly what's on our client's system. And basically, we shifted from a client digitalization by manually entering data to a Winga company-wide digitalization. Now, when I have meetings with our QA teams across Vietnam, China, or Bangladesh, we're talking about KPIs and how our performance is done on a factory level, not on a client level. We can look at a lot of data, such as total inspections, how many units shipped, pass rates, fail rates, how many CP reports were written. And that used to take a lot of time, but now with a snap of a finger, you log onto the website, I can access that data in Hong Kong, US, anywhere I go. And I also asked the question too, like, Carlos, did you think about this in the beginning? Like, I thought it was an inspection platform. But Inspectorio actually continually develops their website. They didn't just do the Inspectorio platform and just leave it at that. They actually listened to the vendor community, factory community, and actually learned that, like, oh, maybe we do need to know how many units we shipped based on the Inspectorio platform client requirement. How many defects did we have in 2018? With the APIs that they built, you saw on the slides previously when Carlos showed, that really, really helped us because it allows us to be very transparent to all our retailers. And in that, these performance meetings, we can create collaborative decisions to award more business to Winga. Like if Winga's doing well, we have more quantities, we can prove it. And I mentioned this before, like the inspectorial process has been a very quick one. It only took us 2 weeks to get on board because it's just that simple. When we first started Inspectorio and when we approached new software or new technology, we're always very worried that, wow, this might take a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of effort, a lot of manpower. But once we started working with Inspectorio, reduction in our manpower in our office, it was a quick training, 2 weeks. And now it's like we continue to communicate with Inspectorio to develop new APIs. And just an ending note, like all in all, like Winga is here to do business with many, many retailers, and we continue to want to do long-term business with new clients. And because of that, we really need meaningful data. Data that's consolidated, data that we can use. And I feel that, and this is like a personal point, but all industries, and not just Winga or apparel, should really embrace the technology and embrace the data because I think it will provide a lot of meaningful things for everyone. And with that, thank you.
I just have some closing remarks, so bear with me for maybe 5 minutes more. What we explained today and what the potential risks of the approach that we discussed today is not new. There's been other industries that have been digitized. So for example, Monster was a digital solution that digitized the process of recruiting and posting jobs. Flickr moved the digital pictures into a portal. Blogger, also for blogging. I'm sure you use some of these solutions at some point. And then Messenger for messaging. So at some point, people were using Blogger. They were using AOL Messenger. They were using Monster and Flickr. But in parallel, there was another company that was being built. And that's a company that potentially today you guys use on a day-to-day basis, which actually what it did is integrated those needs and those processes within one solution. And step by step, that made the process of adoption faster. You might record the time that somebody talked to you about LinkedIn on the first moment. And maybe you say, I don't know what is that. But then you heard that potentially a big part of your contacts were already on LinkedIn. And that adoption and then the process of getting activating and using it was very smooth because of the dynamic of the network. So I just wanted to add this additional view into what is the value also for the new commerce that are joining as you adopt this platform approach. So we talk about the journey also, and what does the journey looks like, and when we talk about digitization, again, are we solving for the pen and paper? Are we solving for the efficiencies of the inspection? Or are we solving for a data-driven quality and a long-term view and a network base? How you do that is complex. Let me tell you, it's not an easy process. We have built teams of the very best data scientists, data engineers, to really lay down the foundations of what the Inspectorio is built on. And what Inspectorio does is in many layers, so remember the onion at the beginning, exactly the same as everybody else's. So yes, we also digitize many of the processes, but there's much more. So as you start laying down the layers, then what is that the Inspectorio is pursuing? And what I wanted to share today is, what is that journey for us? What is that we want to do? So the end goal and how we leverage data is to build this. So we're moving from digital to creating processes of automation, and then from automation to optimization, with the end view of creating this autonomous system, this smart system that is built on machine learning algorithms that guide the process and the right approach. And the way that you do that cannot be built by data inflows of only one direction. So another important thing about the Inspectorio is that we embrace all the data points in the different directions. So it's not only coming from the quality activities that are done on the floor of the inspection, but also what happens by the different stakeholders being involved. And not only that, but also after you ship those products, what happens with that? And then the interest of the data is because we are building the engine that processes that data and convert that into risk prediction and risk algorithms, which is a process that, again, is very challenging, but really what is the value to large operations and really to anybody, but really starts from the large implementations, power users, and that's where we have been really focusing on and expanding our network very quickly, is in the predictability, in the automation, and the organization of something that normally will take many overhead to manage, especially on global operations. But we're not only staying there, because we also don't believe that once we create this layer of collaboration across different facilities that start implementing Inspectorio also as their quality management system, our job is finished. So we're launching Inspectorio Rise, and this is a sneak peek of what is coming also in the weeks to come. Inspectorio Rise is our focus to also innovate and disrupt sustainability monitoring. And again, leveraging the base of that network of factories, vendors, retailers, and brands to collect data and create these levels of collaboration. Because if you look at for sustainability, there are so many different standards for social, so many different standards for environmental, and each one of these standards have their own solutions. So how do you integrate all in one? And how do you convert that data to a broader view of risk? So that's what we're working on Inspectorio. If you want to learn more, I really encourage you to stop by. We have the booths on the upper floor, and I'd love to talk to you more on detail. I separated some time in case there's questions from the audience, so happy to answer any questions.
I'm sure there's got to be some questions here. There's a lot of information, so please, if the mics are ready, put your hands up and ask Carlos or even Danny a question, because you're the hands-on guy. You've done the real work. Any questions, please? Yes, here we go.
Maybe the drinks are holding.
Over here. Microphone over here.
Hi, I'm from Lianfeng. So I would like to ask a question about a statement made by Danny before about the fact that you have all the data already integrated to your platform, like TechPack and PO. So I would like to know, how do you do that with different system or PLM or ERP from different customer?
Yeah. So the way that we do this, and that's why also Danny referred to as the APIs. And so just as a parenthesis, really the way to leverage this collaboration is to first build the digital channels to execute activities and data flows within Inspectorio. But there's so much more that is going on outside of Inspectorio. And so we have an important team of data integration, and we integrate with many different third-party solutions. Within the particular question, so first, the data inflows from the client. So let's say in the case of Danny, is coming in from the different clients that he has that operate on Inspectorio. But we also integrate to their ERP system from where we pull the data related to their internal operations. So you have this holistic view of the external flows and the internal flows in one interface. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, beer and wine beckon. So thank you very much, Carlos. Thank you very much,
Thank
Danny.
you so much. Thank you.